This is Stephen Winsenberg on News Radio 1040 WHO. Everybody's heard of RAGBRAI, but has everybody heard of RAGBRAI? Well, that's the way you're supposed to pronounce it. That's what John and Ann Karras say, and they've written a book about it. It's called RAGBRAI. Everyone pronounces it wrong. And John and Ann, welcome to WHO Radio.
Thank you.
Now, Ann, I have to ask you first, how did you ever get this guy to talk you into going on these trips every year? Because I understand John's motivation after reading the book, because with John Karras and Donald Call and the Register sending you out a little publicity thing. But how did he talk you into doing it, Ann?
Well, he didn't talk me into it. I talked him into it.
Oh, he didn't think you could do it.
It worked out the way it does with lots of women. Their husbands say, no, you can't do it. That's too hard. So immediately, we can do it.
And it's amazing you have been on all but one of the rides.
I missed ride number 6.
And
there were 12 women on the very first ride. Now I think the women outnumber the men.
Isn't that amazing? And John, when you started all this back, 27 years ago?
It was 1973.
Yeah, 73. When you started all this, did you have any clue that this was going to grow into the big event that it is?
No, we had absolutely no clue, and we had no plans for that either. It just kind of happened to us, and we spent many, many years trying to keep up with the people. There was a T-shirt I saw on RAGBRAI one time that I must hurry and catch up with my people, for I am their leader. It was Mahatma Gandhi quote, and that's the position we were in for several years.
You actually say that it all kind of started out as a joke almost.
Yeah, it was a lark. It wasn't very serious. I mean, it wasn't a serious thing. Carl and I wanted to ride our bikes across the state. We'd been doing a lot of biking and figured we would be able to do that. And talked to the Register, our bosses, and said, "Hey, this would be a great promotion for the paper. Why don't you pay our way?" And they said, "Okay," and that was it.
And Donald Call later went to say that you created a monster, basically.
Well, that's what he says.
He calls it a life sentence. He said, I didn't know it would be a life sentence.
Yeah, well, what's so bad about that? You know, hey, it's a good thing to be remembered for, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're helping people out. You're encouraging people to bike. You are also very concerned about safety. I know that you've been pushing bike safety and things like that. So if anything, you've helped the whole health of Iowa, I would say.
Well, yeah, that's a great side benefit. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good event. Too.
So you don't necessarily see it as the monster that Donald Call says it is.
I don't think it's a monster. No.
Yeah, John, tell us about the dipping of the tire.
Well, the second year I wrote in one of my pieces, and of course there will be the traditional dipping of the rear wheel in the Missouri River and the front wheel in the Mississippi River. And, of course, there was no tradition at all. And I
you just made that up.
Yeah, I made it up. And I thought as I wrote it, boy, this is really stupid. Nobody's going to do this. And everybody does it. They've been doing it every year.
And that's the thing, people, they can't wait for that moment.
I know. We have towns that import, if they're not on the river in the Missouri, and, of course, only 2 cities are, Sioux City and Council Bluffs. Mm-hmm. We start in other places. They bring river water to the start in a tank truck and spray it out on the road.
Yeah.
They've been doing that.
It's just amazing. The book is called RAGBRAI. Everyone pronounces it wrong. We're going to talk about the pronunciation in just a moment, and also some of the wonderful photographs that Ann has in the book as well. It's Winsenberg on the weekend on News Radio 1040 WHO, and I can imagine that John and Ann only hope that next weekend we have this kind of weather for the start of the brand new RAGBRAI, right?
We certainly do hope for that. We've had weeks like that. We've had all variety of weather.
You've had disaster weather, and you've had beautiful weather.
We've had cold, we've had heat, we've had humidity, we've had gorgeous weather. Rain.
Yeah, lots of rain.
I want to say just one more thing about that tradition. I've been trying ever since then to create another tradition, and I've never been successful, so it's pretty much a matter of luck.
Do you have an idea of what you want your other tradition to be?
Well, I was going to have an annual hug-in on Friday night. It never took off. And
a hug-in?
Yeah, I can't remember what any of the others
I'll tell you,
were.
John, after reading your book, it sounds like there may be a little too much hugging going on in RAGBRAI. Some of those, you have a chapter there where you talk about some of the, let's say, personal relationships that occur.
Yeah.
So I think you better be careful with that one.
Okay.
Let's talk about your backgrounds. John, tell us about your background. You're not from this area.
Grew up in Cleveland, met my wife at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. We got married in my senior year. I've worked for newspapers all my adult life. Worked for a weekly in New Jersey, worked for the Meadville Tribune Republican for 5 years, came to Des Moines in 1959. We had one child in New Jersey, two in Pennsylvania, and one in Iowa.
Now, when you came here to work for the Register, you were not a writer, were you?
No, in fact, I was an editor of one sort or another all my professional life. The writing has been kind of incidental.
Right. That's just as this is all developed and you started doing reports from RAGBRAI.
Yeah.
Now, Ann, tell us about your background.
Oh, born in New Jersey. John told you how we met. I became a med tech, and after I left the health occupation field, I started photography. And that's where I was very much into it during the RAGBRAI years.
That's just kind of a hobby?
I don't do that anymore. It was more than a hobby. It was in between professional and hobby. I did several things.
She sold a lot.
I sold to the paper sometimes,
I
but
see.
you see, the Register sent their own photographers
Right.
on RAGBRAI, so I was never able to use those pictures until now.
Some people, Ann, just think that you can go out with a camera and take a picture and you're a photographer, but that's not true.
No, I found out. I thought that too the first year. That is not true at all. It's just really hard work.
For instance, when you're shooting RAGBRAI, when you're trying to get pictures, for instance, the cover photo of the book is just gorgeous with the winding road and the bicyclists there. How are you able to set up a shot in a professional way so that's different from just an amateur shot?
I did carry, I didn't carry a tripod. I had to use some fast film and had to keep ahead of other bicyclists because one thing you like to do is not get the backs of them. Of course,
Right.
you do anyway. But I carried a camera with me, and that's extra weight, and that means stopping and deciding what you're going to shoot. So it takes a lot of extra energy, I would say.
So John's work probably went more in the planning, and Ann's work went more in the actual ride, where you had to be thinking, Ann, of what was going to happen. You had to get on ahead to make sure that you got the right shots.
I was thinking of the photography and thinking of getting to the ending town
Right.
and what I could eat.
I wrote a piece every day. I've done that every year on RAGBRAI. I've written something. In the early years, Call would write we did all kinds of different things, but we both wrote. And then Offenberger came on board in 1983, and then he resigned from the paper last year.
Tell us now about the title, okay? I've heard this story. I've read it. Everybody fights it. I hear you two pronouncing it RAGBRAI.
You know, I think we pronounce it wrong. I'm beginning to think.
But you're going to swear to us that we all pronounce it wrong when we say RAGBRAI. John, tell us why.
Well, it's AI. The fair, your hair. You don't go to the fire. You don't go to don't comb your hire.
Right.
And of course, there aren't any English words that end in AI. I don't think. There are Spanish, and they're pronounced I, as in high.
So this is so we're using the foreign pronunciation of RAGBRAI.
You're not in Spain, but saying things as the Spanish do. That's what you're doing.
Now, the first year it was called something completely different.
Oh, it was just the Great 6-Day Bicycle Ride. We did it in 6 days. And then the second year was RAGBRAI, the second annual Great Bicycle Ride across Iowa. And then at that point, we saw that it wasn't going to be just a once-off thing. And the editor of the paper at the time, Michael Gartner, said, get the Register's name in the thing, will you, for crying out loud? So then I went to the RAGBRAI thing and Roman numerals after that.
That's a great idea, too. Great concept. But you also say in the book that you named it RAGBRAI kind of as a joke.
Well, yeah, I had in mind, as I said, the acronyms were coming into vogue at the time. I don't think that they'd been all that popular before, but everything had to be initials. All the government agencies were doing that. And I thought, well, now that's really a silly thing, and I'd make up an acronym. I'd make it as long and as silly as I could think of,
right.
and everyone would think it was a big joke and get a laugh.
And
we
now,
laughed.
And now everybody thinks it's just wonderful.
They do indeed.
And you're laughing.
I know.
I know someone who named their dog after that.
Oh, come on.
I was in Colorado, and the dog's name was RAGBRAI.
I never heard that story, by the way.
That's funny. This is Stephen Winsenberg on The Weekend. John and Ann Karras are here. They have written RAGBRAI. Everyone pronounces it wrong. John wrote it, and Ann has the pictures in it. And one of the sad things about the history of RAGBRAI is some of the tragedies that have occurred. And you've, of course, gone through the broken limbs and all that, but you've had
deaths as well. It's something that eventually, I suppose, had to happen, right, John?
Yeah, we didn't have our first one until I believe it was 1983. And we've had a lot of, I can't remember the number, I'm going to say 14, 15, something like that. The odd thing about it is that only one of them is really bicycle-related. They've been heart attacks, various allergic reactions.
You know what I noticed? When you were listing in the books the people who had died on RAGBRAI, I was amazed how many of them were young. I thought maybe these would be all old people or something, but no, you're talking about people in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah, well, the first death was a young man who was a med tech, and he had a heart condition, and he'd known it, and he died.
So your advice is to be very cautious before you approach this ride. Make sure you're in good physical shape, that your doctor's cleared you for this type of strenuous activity.
Well, that's good. That's good advice for anything you do. But there really isn't any assurance that there are all kinds of things that doctors can't find too.
There were a couple of drownings also, which were unexplained.
Right.
Now, John and Ann, you have also had your own ups and downs there in terms of health. I know John had heart problems. He had a heart attack at one point. And Ann, didn't you have to take over for him that year?
I did. I rode the ride that year, and our son came out and stayed with his dad, and I substituted for him. Now, the ride that I missed, I took my aunt on a bus trip out west.
Now, John, you had your heart attack. It was right before the ride.
It was just a week before.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
And everyone was shocked.
Yeah, I was shocked.
Because you were in great physical
and I was
shape.
Shocked.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had ridden over 2,000 miles already by that day that happened.
And what gave you the stamina to continue on? Because I think most folks would think, gosh, this would be too difficult to do that.
Well, John really wanted me to do it. And I had prepared for the ride, and we did have somebody here. It was very disappointing for John. He came up and spent the last 2 days with us. And that's when he started a make-up RAGBRAI ride. So that we did the route that he missed, and the next year we did the route that I missed.
Really?
But that's just a fun private ride.
Yeah. And you don't have 10,000 people with you.
No, we have about 20, and we call it MOGOB, mostly old guys on bikes. We've been doing it ever since. We even have T-shirts.
When do you do that?
About the last week in May.
Okay, we'll be out there watching for you. And we better be careful, right? Also, John, you allude to the fact in the book, you don't really go into this, but you had a depression. You suffered a depression at one point.
Yeah, it was the second year, and I think it was a matter of incredible expectations and great stress and fear. We had no idea the second year what we were getting into, except we knew we were going to have a bunch of people. And we were certain that someone was going to get killed by a car on the road. I mean, this is a reasonable expectation in a situation like that, and when it was ended, it was just seemed like we were looking into a black pit, and it took me longer to get out of it than the others. But Benson and Call went through pretty much the same thing. It was a very sobering experience, one you just didn't want to repeat.
Is that because you had put so much work into the planning of it and you were just drained?
I think so. I think that was it.
Also, don't you think part of it is this, you allude to this in the book as well, the idea that you are now a celebrity. People all of a sudden started looking up to you as a celebrity, and this was a guy who had just sat in the newsroom doing his job all these years, and all of a sudden he's a celebrity.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that was part of it too.
Finally, tell us about your kids, because I think you said in the book that your kids really haven't picked up on this RAGBRAI interest.
Well, our younger daughter is coming this year. She's going to do it this year.
Has she done it before?
She did part of the second year, I think.
Oh, it's been that long.
No, she did the whole one.
She did all of the fourth year.
The fourth year, that was it.
So it's been a while.
Our son did half of the very first year. He was in high school. But he's tied up with family now, and our other daughter is just beginning to bike.
So they're
now
just starting.
45.
Yeah, well, this happened to you, too. In your 40s, you got interested
when I
in
took it up.
Sure. That's right. So now the family's following in your footsteps.
Yeah, right.
John and Ann, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks
Yes,
for having
thank
us
you
on.
very
Nice
much.
talking with John and Ann Karras, the authors of RAGBRAI. Everyone pronounces it wrong.